Welcome to A View from the Tower, a chance for you to learn a little more about Mount Union College. Join us as we talk with some of the very special faculty, administrators, alumni, students, and friends of Mount Union. I'm Matt Smith, and together we'll discover the tradition, a tradition of excellence at Mount Union College. Throughout the program, we'll be highlighting events on the Mount Union College campus for the week of March 31st through April 5th. On Monday, March 31st, the popular astronomy series will present a program entitled Our Milky Way Galaxy, Eternal Galaxies, Quasars, and Our Universe, Is There Life Out There? In Wilson Hall, room 219 at 8 p.m. One of the people who makes Mount Union such a special place is Dean Terrence Taylor, Dean of Men at Mount Union. WRMU's Elizabeth Brooke caught Dean Taylor with a free moment for this interview.
On today's program, we're here with Dean Terrence Taylor, Dean of Men at Mount Union College. We will be discussing student government at Mount Union. Dean Taylor, when was student government implemented at Mount Union?
Okay, Liz, I had to check through Mr. Yost Osborne's book, A Select School, to get the correct answer on that one. I wasn't real sure, but according to information that Mr. Osborne has in his book, that student Mount Union Senate was implemented approximately 1921, and at that point it was composed of representatives from the four classes and also from the faculty, which is certainly a little different than it is today. And then about fall of 1922 or a little later, it then became strictly a student group, and the name at that point was changed to Student Senate, which it is today.
How are the senators selected at Mount Union?
Well, there's several different types of selection or election processes. As you know, the officers for Senate are elected by the students in a campus election. And then there are also elected representatives from several of the campus organizations, some of the larger organizations. For instance, they have one elected representative, one voting representative from Panhellenic Council, the Interfraternity Council, Associated Women Students, Men's Residence Council, Student Activities Council, Black Student Union, etc. So there are the campus elected representatives, there are the institution or the activity organization representatives, and then in addition to that there are 5 elected representatives at large from each of the 4 classes, so that you have a cross representation, approximately 35 voting members of Student Senate. And then there are also representatives who attend the meetings representing various other organizations on campus who are not necessarily voting members, but they normally show up each of the meetings when Senate is meeting.
How is Senate funded?
Well, Senate's funded from the college, and this is money which is taken out of the student fee portion of the money that you as a student pay, each semester. Each student pays approximately $260 per semester, and then this is allocated for various activities around campus. This year, Senate is funded at approximately $45,000, and this is for the year. And I think next year, because of increases which are needed, well, primarily in the area of the Dynamo and the Unionian, they have requested, and I think the request has been approved for approximately $2,500 to $3,000 increase in funding for Senate. As you know, there are some of the major organizations on campus are funded directly by Senate. I would indicate that the $45,000 is allocated by Senate, and they go through the regular budget process. Each group comes in with their requests. Senate examines the request, and then after rather lengthy debate in some cases, then makes the final allocation. The major organizations funded by Senate are Dynamo, which is the college newspaper, Unionian, which is the yearbook, Black Student Union, Calliope, which is the literary magazine, and then the Student Activity Council.
Thank you, Dean Taylor. From A View from a Tower, I'm Elizabeth Rook.
Yost Osborne College historian at Mount Union took this opportunity to talk with us about a little history at the college.
Welcome to the Mount Union College Historical Series with Yost Osborne.
This is Yost Osborne, librarian at Mount Union College, talking to you about the past on the campus. This time I want to talk to you about a colorful personality on the campus a century ago, Uncle Jimmy Armstrong. He was a black custodian of Chapman Hall. When the college charter was granted in 1858, the major concern seemed to be about liberal and practical education, a religious atmosphere, equality of sexes, and political freedom. Although there was no overt reference to race or color, this does not mean there was not concern at this point. Many of the settlers around the Mount Union area were Quaker families, staunch supporters of temperance reform, as well as ardent backers of the anti-slavery movement, the abolitionists, and agents for the Underground Railway. There's a story, a sort of campus legend that had been handed down from seminary days about the two sisters from Virginia, perhaps Amanda and Christina Burke, and the performance by one of the sisters at a literary exercise in the 1850s. She read as her required performance an essay evidently prepared by some talented advocate of the Southern sentiment entitled The Refining and Civilizing Influence of Slavery. It happened that on that occasion there was present, as a visitor to the institution, a colored orator from London, England, perhaps William Wells Brown. Following the reading of the young lady's essay, Professor Hartshorne introduced the visitor and asked him to speak, saying, "Here at Mount Union it is our policy to hear both sides of every question." The colored visitor then gave an eloquent statement of his side of the slavery question, much to the embarrassment of the young ladies from Virginia. Although a few colleges during this period were admitting blacks, colored students as they were then known, there's no record of any attending Mount Union. In fact, not until Wayne Manzilla graduated a decade later. In the meantime, there was a black on campus who became a legend during the more than quarter century that he was associated with Mount Union, James Armstrong, custodian of Chapman Hall and also the literary societies, familiarly known to students, faculty, and townspeople alike as Uncle Jimmy. In fact, many alumni who had been away from the campus for years usually had a familiar question on returning. Not, how is President Hartshorne or some member of the faculty, but how is Uncle Jimmy? Uncle Jimmy was a man of magnificent physique, splendid voice, and a really noble bearing. Although he had been born in slavery, his mother worked and sacrificed to secure his freedom. Sometime during the 1850s, he and his wife, who was known as Aunt Nancy, came to Mount Union, the little village at that time. Both were members of the Mount Union Methodist Episcopal Church. In fact, Uncle Jimmy was licensed as an exhorter in the church, similar to a lay preacher. Despite his lack of formal education, he possessed natural oratorical talent, and in his prayers and exhortations he displayed remarkable powers of eloquence. He was much in demand to assist at revival meetings. One such request came from a minister at Columbiana in the 1860s to help lead in the singing. Another, a decade later, requested his presence at spatial meeting time. He was a counselor and confidant for many students, and after they left the Mount, in moments of despair and discouragement, they remembered their Uncle Jimmy and wrote to him. Their regard and esteem for him are apparent in these excerpts from letters. Here is a letter signed, "One of your boys." Another, "I have not my Uncle Jimmy to come into my room and pray for me now as he used to." As one of his boys later wrote, "It was a bright light that came from his eyes. It was a ray from a radiant soul." Perhaps the role that Uncle Jimmy enjoyed most, at least the one by which most students knew him, was that of custodian of the literary society halls. But he was more than a mere custodian. In an era when the literary societies afforded the main social, cultural, and political outlet on campus, he was an indispensable figure at the programs each Friday evening. The minutes of the societies regularly noted his arrangements and bouquets of flowers. Often he was called upon to open the meeting with prayer. Although the college championed coeducation, At the Literary Society programs, young men sat on one side of the hall, young ladies on the other. Uncle Jimmy was supposed to deliver notes concerning business matters or announcements from members of the audience to the platform officers. Somehow, most of the notes were delivered from one side of the hall to the other as students tried to circumvent the famous eighth rule. It is somewhat singular that the death of Uncle Jimmy occurred in the year 1884, the very year that a young black student, Wayne Manzilla, from nearby Beloit, entered Mount Union as a freshman. This has been Yost Osborne, librarian at Mount Union College, talking to you about the past on the campus.
The convocation for Wednesday, April 2nd will be presented by Dr. Eleanor Barber, director of the Riemann Schneider Bach Institute of Baldwin Wallace, and she'll present a program on the life of Dr. Albert Schweitzer at 10 a.m. in Presser Hall. Also on Wednesday, April 2nd, the Mount Union College lacrosse team will play host to the Buckeyes of Ohio State University. Game time is 3:30 p.m. at the 23rd Street Field. Come on out and support Purple Raider lacrosse. All of the events listed in today's program are open to the public. For further information concerning any of the events, call the college at 821-5320. Once again, the number 821-5320. You have been listening to A View from the Tower, a weekly radio magazine devoted to the people of Mount Union College. A View from the Tower is written and produced by the staff of WRMU FM under the supervision of Station Director Charles R. Morford. Continuity and final production by Matt Smith. Join us next week when our guest on A View from the Tower will include Yost Osborne, college historian. The preceding program was a presentation of WRMU FM, a service of Mount Union College in Alliance, Ohio.